In this video, I'm going to walk you through how I started out with this base image and transformed it into this glowing beauty here, so let's get started. Welcome to Blended Graphics, everybody. My name is Jason Ortega, and thank you so much for joining me for day 3 of my 30 days of Photoshop. Today, I got something a little bit different for you. If you watch my previous 2 videos or follow me on my Blended Graphics Instagram account, it is no surprise to you that I love to do a lot of glow work. And that is going to be the topic for today's video. I get asked a lot how I create these glows in all of my works, so today I want to use one of my previous pictures that I made, and I'm going to use that as the base to walk you through step by step on how I create these effects. So let's check it out. Okay, so this picture is going to be the final image that we ultimately create. The very first thing I want to talk about is contrast. Contrast to me is one of the most important elements that you can have to really make your glowing works pop. And to show you what I'm talking about, let's drag this image in here where the environment is much brighter outside. And with that adjustment alone, you can see how ineffective that glow is. So my first tip to you, if you want to add glows to your work, is just to make sure that whatever surrounding areas that are near that object that's glowing, just to make sure that it's much darker than the glow itself to, like I said, to have that contrast and to make those elements really come alive. Okay, let's start out fresh here where we shut off all of the glows to that lamp as well as turn down the exposure to where the final result will be. And we're going to build this thing up step by step. The first thing to notice about this lamp is that it's very boring. It's very dull, it's very desaturated. So the first changes that we need to make are we're going to throw a levels adjustment layer on here. And we're just going to increase the contrast just a little bit. And then we're going to throw on top of that a hue and saturation adjustment layer. Go ahead and click that colorize box. And then what you want to do is you want to find a nice gold color. And we're going to use this as our base. And this is going to be the result of those adjustments. From here, I added a new layer and clipped that onto the lamp. And then I wanted to search for a color that's brighter than what the lamp already is, because you want to have those different intensity levels within the glow. Some parts are going to be brighter than others. You want to have that varied effect. So in our case, I wanted to focus on the areas to me that I think are going to be the brightest. So I'm going to focus a little bit more on the bottom side of the lamp and a little bit on the edges. And here's the picture with that change. And before we continue on, I do just want to note that whenever I'm working with glows, I'm usually using a soft round brush right around 10%. And sometimes my flow's at 100%, it might be a little bit lower. And if I'm working on the body of the object, I'll just use this at 10%. If I'm working on the edges and want to create some sort of rim light, I usually crank up my opacity all the way up to 100%, and I'll have either a clipping mask or a selection of the subject itself, and then just on the outside of those edges, I'll start painting, and then you'll see that light and the colors slowly start to fade on those edges, and it's really effective. Alright, so let's move on. From here, what I want to do is I want to make the bright spots of this lamp even brighter, and then I also want to introduce a little bit more variety of color and heat intensity levels. So here's a picture of kind of what that process looks like. And you can tell with these first 2 pictures, some of the areas that I made even a little bit brighter. All I did was I used the same color that I was working on with before. I increased the opacity and then just focused on smaller sections to, again, give us the impression that this is going to be the brighter and the hotter spots of the object. If we go ahead and focus now on the second and third images, in order to create this effect, all I did was I just added a new layer. I picked a different yellow color than what I was currently working with, and then I just brushed all over the object in its entirety. And this way it's going to help me out when I create those glows effects, because it's, have you tried to make a dark image glow or dark edges glow? It doesn't look too effective. So you want to make sure that any part that is going to be glow, it does need to have a good bright foundation to work with. Okay, at this point now, I'm looking at this lamp, and this brown spot right in the center is really starting to bug me a bit. So all I did was just added another layer, and again, picked a different color, something a little bit with more of an orange tint. And then I just, with a low opacity, just brushed over that to cover it up a bit. And this was the outcome of that. Alright, so right now things are actually starting to look pretty good. Let's go ahead and drag back in our base image as a reference so you can see kind of the progression that we've made so far. And just to recap all the changes that went on between this first image and the second one is we added a levels adjustment layer. We also added a hue and saturation adjustment layer on top of that as well. We created a few layers where we painted on some different bright spots using different colors to create different levels of heat intensity, and that's where we're at right now. Moving on to the next step, I just traced the outline of the design at the top by the lid with a nice bright yellow, and I wanted to brighten that up a little bit, and then from here I wanted to start introducing a little bit more of the rim glows. So on a layer underneath the lamp, I started working and painting along the edges with a nice soft round brush to start that glowing effect. And anytime I'm working with rim lights or rim glows, I'm working with multiple layers at a time and using multiple colors. Like for example, have you ever turned on a flashlight and then put your hand over it? You'll notice the area that's closest to the flashlight, you'll see more of a white color and a white rim, because obviously that's the closest to the light itself. And then the further away you go from that light source, you see the color start to change. You'll see it go from like that white light to maybe a bright yellow to an orange, and then ultimately to kind of like a reddish color. And I want to achieve that same result with my work, so I usually like to pick, multiple colors, like in this case doing like a white and then a bright yellow and then maybe an orange color, the further that we're traveling away from the edge of the lamp or the brightest spot of the lamp. So I usually do that underneath the lamp layer itself, and then maybe I'll add one layer on top of the lamp as like an overall atmospheric glow. And let's go ahead and take a look what adding that second layer of the glow kind of looks like. And with that adjustment, you can see now that we have like this secondary ring going around the lamp itself. It's hard to tell just from this picture, but I did in fact use a separate color than what I was currently working with. And then I just painted that all around the edges. Another thing that you can do as well, where you can just tweak it and play around with it, and you might have a good surprise, is actually playing around with the blend modes. By doing something like that, maybe you might stumble across something that works in your favor. So that's just another option for you that you can try out. And just as a personal preference, this is a little bit too gold for my liking, so I just wanted to change that up a little bit. I went ahead and added a hue and saturation adjustment layer, and then just kind of played around with some of the settings in there to kind of get the more desired effect that I was going for. And now you can see that we have something that's a little bit more of a bright bronze color as opposed to something that's more gold tinted. It is a subtle change, but I do like it. Okay, now at this point, the lamp is actually looking pretty good. The glows are pretty much right where I want it to be, and I'm just going to add a couple of other little tweaks, but the biggest one and most important change that's going to take place here is that in reality, anytime you have multiple objects in an environment, and especially things that are close to your light source, there's going to be some sort of interaction going on. And in this case, our ground is going to be affected by the light of the lamp. So just like I referenced before, putting the flashlight under your hand and how that color starts to spread, well, we now need to achieve that same effect with the ground. And you're going to see a little bit of a color change going from the area that's closest to the lamp, and then the further along that you spread away from that, you'll see the color starts to change. And so in this picture here, essentially what I did was added a couple of different layers to this. And like I said, I picked different colors. I also used different opacities depending on how close or how far away from the lamp I'm going to be. And then I also just kind of played around with the blend modes. Like I said before, sometimes it's all about trial and error and just kind of going through and seeing what you like, maybe what you don't like. More often than not, I typically use an overlay blend mode or a soft light blend mode when I'm working with light having interactions with other parts of the environment or other objects. So, just go ahead and play around with those. And with that, we've pretty much reached the end here. At this point, I'm only going to add just a couple more little effects to put a nice little bow on it. So at this point, I'm just going to add a new layer beneath the lamp, and then using a cloud brush or dust brush, I'm just going to do a couple of dabs behind the lamp to pretty much emulate that we got some sand blowing around because, after all, we're in a desert, and that makes sense because we have so much sand everywhere. So I wanted to create that effect. And then as I mentioned before, I do like to add one final glow on top of what I'm currently working with just to kind of blend everything nicely together. So I added a new layer, and then using a really soft round brush, I increased the brush size and turned down the opacity to about 10%. And then I just did a couple of dabs here just to create an overall glowing effect. And then from there, the only other thing I added was I used like a particle brush and a glitter brush, and then I just added some little effects on top of the lamp, just again to kind of give it a little bit of pizzazz and that sparkle to just really emphasize that glowing effect. And here's the final image. Thanks again for everyone that stopped by to watch this. If this is the kind of video where you enjoy seeing what my process is like to make these effects, please be sure to hit that subscribe button and click the bell to stay notified, because there's going to be a lot more just like this in the upcoming days. Hope to see you again tomorrow for day 4 of 30 Days of Photoshop. Take care.